You know, it was one of those. It's one of those things. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. Kamala Harris had to do interviews, so she did some. And then everyone was like, why? You shouldn't have done that one. What's up? This is Mark Kaye saves the Republic. And I have to say, I was wrong about Bret Baier. I didn't think Bret Baier had it in him. I didn't think Bret Baier was going to give it to Kamala Harris the way he gave it to Kamala Harris. That sounds dirtier than I meant it to. That's not, you know what I mean? But Kamala Harris, she went in. She went into Fox News and she got mauled by a bear. See what I did there? Thank you. And it's unrecoverable. What's happening to Kamala Harris is unrecoverable. She will not be able to recover from this one. This is, and I know we say this is the end of her, but it's, look, I mean, don't even look at it. Just look at what's happening in the world. After Bret Baier destroyed Kamala Harris on live television, it just started to explode. Donald Trump is at 62.3% in the Polymarket betting average. Kamala Harris is at 37.8%. This continues to change by the minute. We're going to check back by the end of the show, and I guarantee this is going to be even higher for Donald Trump and lower for her. Look, she lost Wisconsin last night. Wisconsin hadn't been called for either candidate. Now it's like a 12-point percentage advantage in the betting markets for Donald Trump. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. All that's left is Nevada, and you can't win with Nevada. I mean, we love Nevada. It's one of my 50 favorite states. But you can't win with just Nevada. You need those swing states. You need those Rust Belt states. And Kamala Harris will not get them, especially after what happened last night. And I'm sure you've seen some of the highlights. I'm sure you've seen some of the lowlights. I did a TikTok last night when I got back from my speaking engagement. And man, that thing blew up. I woke up this morning, I had like 1 million views on it because it was just so. Now I really want Kamala Harris to do Joe Rogan, but she's not going to do Joe Rogan. She will never step foot inside another unfriendly environment or unpredictable environment. Not even unfriendly, but unpredictable. And you can't predict how a Joe Rogan interview would go for Kamala Harris. This one was maybe a little more predictable, although I said it yesterday. Bret Baier is the cuddliest, fuzziest, softest of all the potential interviewers she could have gotten from Fox News. Anyone else would have been way tougher on her. And he came out swinging. And it's not that, it's not that he was rude. It's not that he was sharp. It's not that he was treating her meanly or badly or whatever. He was doing what every other interview should have done. Every other interview she wasn't prepared for this one. It looked aggressive because she didn't know how to do interviews because she hasn't done any. It looked a little aggressive because she's been avoiding this kind of interview for, gosh, her entire life, really. But the last 70 days, she's done nothing like this. Every interview has been scripted, pre-taped. It's been edited. We know that the 60 Minutes interview was highly edited. She sat down with Charlemagne the God and Stephen Colbert and Howard Stern and The View and the BJ sex podcast girl, Alex Cooper. She sat down with people who she knew were going to be on her side. And when she has to sit down and actually answer questions, when she gets pushback, I mean, she just can't handle it. And it was right from the get-go. She said some things last night during this interview that you should never say. My favorite part was when she tried to get subliminal with Bret Baier. And Bret Baier said probably the best line of the election so far. Bret Baier, other than they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. This was my favorite line that Bret Baier came up with yesterday during the Kamala Harris interview.
Madam Vice President. You and I both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
You and I both know what I actually don't. What are you talking about? Question mark. That was the quote. That's the quote. We actually have it. I've been like, woman, what are you even talking about?
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
Yeah, we don't know what this woman's been talking about forever. And Bret Baier actually in the interview yesterday said, Madam Vice President, I actually don't know. What are you talking about? That's the quote of the election. That's the quote that buried. That's the quote that buried. No one knows, Brad.
You and I both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
And Bret Baier has this great way about him where, and I still don't think he's conservative, but he has this great way about him where he can say one thing and mean something totally different. And he's very calm. He's very, he's appealing to people. I know a lot of women like him, that kind of thing, but he's just this soft guy. And when he says, Madam Vice President, he's saying it. But what really comes across is, Madam Vice President, you're not answering the question and you're actually lying. And I don't have a lot of time. So could you please shut up and answer my question? And all he has to say is Madam Vice President. And you get the meaning behind it. It was really fantastic. And we're going to roll through this entire, there's so much of this interview we have to roll through. We're going to roll through the entire interview here in just a minute. But I don't know if you saw this new ad. I don't know if you saw this. This is my new favorite ad. And fun fact, my new favorite song. It's from Latinos por Trump.
Ay, 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 por Dios. Yo voy a votar.
Yo voy a votar por Donald Trump.
La buena vida,
The good
la
life.
economía,
The economy.
hazlo por tu familia,
Oh.
latinos por Donald Trump.
Ay, 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 por la vida. Latinos por Trump. I love it. It's my favorite. I'm going to start it's taco night tonight. So I'm going to actually play that when I'm making the tacos, and I'm going to get the kids in there. We're going to be like, por la economía. It's very fun. Oh, big thing going on tonight, by the way. More bad news for Kamala Harris. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, I guess I should tell you to subscribe to this channel because you're going to love it. You're going to have so much fun today. Here's what's been happening. And I knew this was inevitable. I get all these messages every single day, and more people are finding the show. More and more people are realizing, hey, Mark Kaye's back. That's great. That's fantastic. We've missed him so much. Last night, I went out to a speaking engagement for the Republican Men's Club of Clay County. And a lot of people there were like, oh, we miss you on the radio. Where can I find you now? Where can I hear the podcast? Where can I watch you live doing your live stream? And so we're still trying to get the word out there. So please subscribe. And most importantly, share this with a lot of folks, because every day I get people saying, oh my gosh, I had no idea you were doing the show. That's the first thing that happens. And then people are like, can you do more than 1 hour? Could you do like 9? And I'm like, probably not 9, but maybe like some days we do an hour and a half. Some days we do an hour and 20 minutes. One day we went 3 hours because we were waiting for Donald Trump to announce Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That was an exciting day. But look, we're going to be going every day. There's so much to do. There's so much to tackle. We're lining up so many interviews. We have so many opportunities. It's a very important election, and we're in the last part of this election. We haven't won yet. I don't care what, like, the poly market's exciting, but this is not what wins the election. Voting wins the election. Getting out there and doing what needs to be done wins the election. And subscribing to this channel does not win the election, but it keeps you informed and it keeps you excited and it keeps you entertained. And I'm going to remind you every single day, you better get out there and vote. So hit the button, hit the bell, hit the follow, hit the thumb up, hit it all. Just go click illegalmente. I think that's how you say it. Los aliens illegal. That's how the interview kicked off yesterday. Bret Baier interviewed Kamala Harris at Fox News and just mauled her. She got mauled by a bear. And it was glorious to watch. She sat down for an interview and she never got up. She was out cold, knocked out. And Bret Baier started off with questions about illegal immigrants, which, immigration is the number one issue. Whenever you go to the debate, whenever you go anywhere else, Kamala Harris does these other sit-down interviews. They always start with stuff she wants to talk about, like, abortion. But immigration is the number one issue in this election, as well as the economy. And Bret Baier started off, boom, right out of the gate, talking to her about the issue that she was in charge of and failed most miserably about. And of course, she didn't like the questions, so she tried to avoid giving any answers.
How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
do you
now,
just a
which
number?
Is,
do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
Brett, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have
it's a
an
rough
immigration
estimate of
system
6 million people have been released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question, I promise you.
I was beginning to answer.
And when you came into office, your administration immediately reversed a number of Trump border policies. Most significantly, the policy that required illegal immigrants to be detained through deportation, either in the U.S. or in Mexico. And you switched that policy. They were released from custody awaiting trial. So instead, included in those were a large number of single men, adult men, who went on to commit heinous crimes. So, looking back, do you regret the decision to terminate Remain in Mexico at the beginning of your administration?
At the beginning of our administration, within practically hours of taking the oath, the first bill that we offered Congress, before we worked on infrastructure, before the Inflation Reduction Act, before the Chips and Science Act.
By the way, what she's doing here is she's trying to buy time. She knows she's only got about 20 minutes, and she knows these questions are going to be questions that she doesn't want to answer, that she doesn't have the answers to, that are going to damage her greatly if she tries to answer them. So what she's doing is she is trying to waste as much time. She's saying, look, I know you want to ask about the immigration bill, but here's all the other bills that we worked on before we got to that. And Bret Baier, he ain't playing this game.
Before the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first bill, practically within hours of taking the oath, was a bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
It was essentially a pathway to citizenship for the... Yes, ma'am.
May I finish responding, please?
But
you have to let me finish,
You
please.
had the White House and the House and the Senate,
I'm
and
in
they
the
didn't
middle
bring up
of
that bill.
responding to the point you're raising,
Okay.
and I'd like to finish.
Yes, ma'am.
We recognized from day one that, to the point of this being your first question, it is a priority for us as a nation and for the American people. And our focus has been on fixing a problem. And from day one, then, we have done a number of things.
No, you haven't. Anyway, so basically what happens here, and this is really telling, and this is where the interview, right out of the gate, at the very first question, Kamala Harris realized Bret Baier isn't Charlemagne the fraud. Pardon me, Charlemagne the God. Bret Baier isn't the beer-swilling Stephen Colbert interview. It's not The View or the BJ Sex podcast. This is a real interviewer. This is a real journalist who's going to push back. And Bret Baier is saying, look, I asked you about on day one, here's what happened. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, they swore their oath of office. They went to the White House and they undid every immigration policy that Donald Trump had put in place to keep us safe. Remain in Mexico, all the other stuff. And now he's asking her, was that a good idea? She goes, you know what we did? We brought in a bill. He goes, that was an amnesty bill. That was an amnesty bill. And we know it was an amnesty bill and it wasn't an immigration bill because so many of your own Democrats voted against it.
Guns and human beings. And Donald Trump, but let me just finish.
Six Democrats voted against that bill.
Learned about that bill and told them to kill it because he preferred to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And in this election, this is rightly a discussion that the American people want to have. And what they want are solutions, and they want a president of the United States who's not playing political games with the issue.
I hear you.
But actually is focused on fixing it.
Six Democrats voted against that bill. It would have allowed 1.8 million illegal immigrants into the country a year. A lot of conservatives had a problem with it.
So did
guns and human beings.
Oh, I'm playing again. So Bret Baier, I hear you. I hear what you're saying, but I just don't believe it because that's not true. It would have allowed all these illegal immigrants into the country. It wasn't going to do anything at all to keep illegal immigration at bay. It wasn't going to help with the Border Patrol. It wasn't going to do anything you're saying. It was masked. It was an amnesty bill masked, wrapped up in some kind of phony, wolf in sheep's clothing costume, and you're trying to run on it. And all of these interviews you've done, all these surrogates you've spoken to over the last couple months, they've allowed you to get away with saying Donald Trump killed a bill that we passed 9 months ago or that we wanted to pass 9 months ago. He killed it because he wanted to run on immigration, which also isn't true. And we had an immigration bill day one, which wasn't true at all. It was an amnesty bill. Everybody let her get away with stuff. Bret Baier did not. I was wrong about Bret Baier. I thought he was going to go soft on her. He went the opposite direction.
You said repeatedly that the border was secure. When in your mind did it start becoming a crisis?
I think we've had a broken immigration system transcending, by the way, Donald Trump's administration, even before. Let's all be honest about that. I have no pride in saying that this is a perfect immigration system. I've been clear, I think we all are, that it needs to be fixed.
This flies right in the face of everything that she's been saying, and I kind of wish that Bret Baier came equipped with clips because she said the border is secure. The border is secure. Alejandro Mayorkas, the border is secure. Joe Biden, the border is secure. They all repeatedly in lockstep have been saying it over and over and over again. And here she is going, I have no pride in this. This has been a problem since before Donald Trump, which, hey, guess who was president before Donald Trump? Barack Obama, and I know exactly where he was. He was with Joe Biden at the Kennedy funeral. But anyway, Barack Obama somewhere is listening to this and go, wait a minute, woman, why you throw me under the bus? Because I yelled at those black men last week? Oh, no, gloves are off. She's throwing Barack under the bus, Joe Biden under the bus. She's taking no responsibility for it, and she's having just the worst time ever. And it gets worse after that. He's like, look, this is not at all what she imagined it would be. And he didn't move on. He spent the majority of this interview, I believe, on immigration because it is such a crucial problem. And he brought up to her face. A lot of these attacks on young women and the impact that it's had on their families. And it was like gut-wrenching to listen to.
Jocelyn Nungari, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Bret,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. There is no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred. So that is true. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago.
Okay, so here we go. So now she's saying the question is, all of these young women who were brutally raped and murdered and their lives destroyed and their parents' lives destroyed, all of them by illegal men, immigrant men that you didn't vet, that you let in. Nobody else did. Joe Biden and you let him in. Donald Trump didn't let him in. Barack Obama didn't let him in. Your policies after day one, when you reversed all of those executive orders, that's the reason these men came in here and killed these women. And do you regret it? And she says it's a terrible tragedy. But let's get back to Donald Trump and this bill from 9 months ago. Forget what happened on day one of my administration with Joe Biden. Let's talk about what didn't happen 9 months ago when this bill died in the Senate because Donald Trump called everybody up. Doesn't matter. Donald Trump and the border bill had nothing to do with any one of these women. These men all came in beforehand. And what Bret Baier really should have asked her is, what was the purpose? What was the purpose? What was the point? She never gets to the point. You go in day one and you say, oh, look, Donald Trump secured our border. Oh, look, Donald Trump made these people stay in Mexico, remain in Mexico until you get vetted. Donald Trump didn't catch and release. These are all great policies. You know what we're going to do? We're going to undo them all. What was the actual thought process? How was that going to benefit Americans? He didn't ask that. She never actually delivered an answer to it. And she just continued to go on about Donald Trump.
It would be 9 months that we would have had more border agents at the border, more support for the folks who are working around the clock trying to hold it all together.
Madam Vice President.
To ensure that no future harm would occur. And this election in 20 days will determine whether we have a president of the United States who actually cares more about fixing a problem, even if it is not to their political advantage in an election, because there was a solution, Bret.
Madam Vice President, it was a policy decision in the early part of your administration.
Yeah, and that was one of the biggest problems with Kamala's interview. She didn't want to talk about herself. She didn't want to talk about her policy. She didn't want to talk about any of that stuff. She just wanted to talk about Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump. And when she didn't have an answer, it always came back to Donald Trump. By the way, I want to remind you once again what Byron Donald said about this bill, because he has this, and this is pinned, if you ever want to find it, on his Congressman Byron Donald's X page. He has two. This is the one with the gray check. It's the official one. But this is why the Senate border deal failed. Let's take a look real quick. It didn't fail because Donald Trump called up senators and said, kill this. I'd like to run on immigration. It failed because, number one, it codified catch and release. Number two, it let in 1.8 million illegal immigrants. Number three, it funded sanctuary cities. Number four, it funded NGOs moving illegals. That's non-government offices or non-government organizations. Lawyers to illegals, work permits to illegals, nothing to deport illegals, no immediate wall funds, weak asylum screening, and this is my favorite, $60 billion to Ukraine. Because when you're securing the American border, when you're keeping Americans safe from illegal criminals crossing into our country from Mexico and Venezuela and El Salvador, you can't do any of that unless you send $60 billion to Vladimir Zelensky in Ukraine. What kind of idiot are you? In fact, Donald Trump's border plan must have been awful, because you know how much money Donald Trump had for Ukraine in his border policy? $0. $0. You call that an immigration policy? There's nothing in there for Ukraine. What are you thinking? Bret Baier kept hammering this point home. Wouldn't let her off the hook.
I will let one of the mothers talk about it. Take a listen.
Because of the Biden-Harris administration open border policies catch and release, they were enrolled in the Alternatives to Detention program. This meant that they were released into the United States. It was not even a full 3 weeks later that they would take my daughter, Jocelyn Nungare's life. I believe the Biden-Harris administration open border policies are responsible for the death of my daughter.
That's the early days. So do you owe them an apology is what I'm saying.
I will tell you that I am so sorry for her loss. I am so sorry for her loss. Sincerely. But let's talk about what is happening right now with an individual who does not want to participate in solutions. Let's talk about that as well.
But do you want to answer
in all fairness, I told you, I feel awful.
Yeah, you feel awful because you know that your career is slowly slipping into the abyss. This is the same thing, BT Dubs. Sorry, Keith. This is the same thing, by the way, that Joe Biden does with Afghanistan. Joe Biden had this horrible withdrawal from Afghanistan. He let the Taliban come in and just destroy everything. He left Bagram Air Base. He left $80-some-odd billion worth of equipment there. He left our allies stranded behind government lines where a lot of them were going to be killed. He let ISIS-K return. And, oh, yes, let's not forget about the 13 dead American Marines when the bomb exploded outside of the Abbey Gate. So and then what did Joe Biden do? He came back and he goes, Donald Trump planned this. I didn't plan. This is Donald Trump's doing. She's doing the same thing. She's saying that he's like, your border policies allowed these murderous thugs into our country, and these women now are childless. They've lost their children because of you. No. Donald Trump didn't pass this bill 9 months ago. That's why these men who came in years ago are here in the country. It makes perfect sense if you're a Democrat. All right, moving on from the border. Kidding. There was so much to talk about with the border. He wasn't done berating her on the border. He wasn't done embarrassing her about the border. And it's a refreshing change, because the border is the crux of pretty much every problem we have in the United States of America. A closed border solves a lot of the issues we have with crime, with drugs, with the economy, with inflation, with the housing shortage. It solves a lot of the problems that we have with Ukraine. It solves a lot of the problems we have with terrorism. I mean, every problem that we have in this country is exacerbated by the open border. And so Bret Baier makes it a point to continue to keep the border conversation going.
There's a lot of people that look back at what you said in 2019 when you first ran for president. And there have been changes, and you've talked about some of them. When it comes to immigration, you supported allowing immigrants in the country illegally to apply for driver's license, to qualify for free tuition at universities, to be enrolled in free health care. Do you still support those things?
Listen, that was 5 years ago, and I'm very clear that I will follow the law. I have made that statement over and over again, and as Vice President of the United States, that's exactly what I've done, not to mention before.
If that's the case, you chose a running mate, Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, who signed those very things into state law. So do you support that?
We are very clear, and I am very clear, as is Tim Walz.
By the way, I'm 100% convinced that that's the first time she heard about Tim Walz's record. If you look at her face here,
that
you look
we
at her,
must
hold on.
support
If you
and
look at her
enforce.
face when he asked the question, she is a deer in headlights. She has no idea what Tim Walz's record is. She has no idea what Tim Walz did as governor of Minnesota. She has no idea how horrible a candidate Tim Walz is. And if she loses this election, or pardon me, when she loses this election, I imagine Tim Walz is going to be a big part of that. But you can see when Bret Baier points out to her that Tim Walz signed a lot of these into law in the state of Minnesota, it's the first time she's heard it.
Support that?
We are very clear, and I am very clear, as is Tim Walz, that we must support and enforce federal law, and that is exactly what we will do.
You know what else Tim Walz is really pretty clear about?
And I'm a knucklehead at times.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All this because she didn't want the Jewish guy on her ticket. I mean, think about that. They were so about placating the pro-Palestinian movement in the Democrat Party that they could not even bear the thought, no pun intended, of having Josh Shapiro, the governor of a state that they desperately needed to win, the very popular governor of a state that they desperately needed to win, to be the running mate. It was, okay, we've got to win Pennsylvania. Josh Shapiro is pretty smart. He doesn't really have too horrible a past. Yeah, there's a couple of minor scandals, but nothing as bad as Tampon Tim Walz. But he's Jewish. And the pro-Palestinian movement in the Democrat Party, they're going to hate, they don't like Jewish people. So we can't pick him, even though we desperately need Pennsylvania. Now she's got Tim Walz, and she's not only losing Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, she could lose Minnesota, because don't nobody back home like him either. And then, then finally Bret Baier moved on from the border. Psych! He just crushed her. Just decided, while I have you here, let me just ramrod all of this border information into your face. And this is probably my favorite of all the border questions. Listen to the delivery of this, because it seems like he's just simply asking a very straightforward question, but he's basically just pimp slapping the crap out of her.
But you frequently talked to the Border Patrol Union for support of that bipartisan bill, and they did. They supported it. But they also just endorsed Donald Trump and said you've been, quote, a failure with border security. Why do you think they said that?
I think they're frustrated, and I get it. They want support. They want support, and that's what that border security bill would have done. These guys down at the border, these men and women, they're working hard. They're working around the clock. I get it.
Okay, I'd like to point out exactly what happened there. Bret Baier says, you didn't get the support of the Border Patrol. In fact, they said you've been an utter failure at border security. Why do you think they said that? He's trying to get her to admit that she's been an utter failure at border security. And what does she do? She admits it. What? The Border Patrol just endorsed Donald Trump. They said you're an utter disaster at the border. Why do they say that? And she goes, I get it. They want support. They want support. I get it. I understand why they think I'm a failure. I understand why they think that Donald Trump's a better choice, because they want support. And then she realized that was a dumb answer. So now I need to throw it back on Donald Trump and say Donald Trump's not supporting the Border Patrol because he killed the bill, which, oh yes, supported the Border Patrol by sending $60 billion to Ukraine. We need to support the Border Patrol. You know what we're going to do? We're not going to build a wall. Okay. We're not going to have asylum screening. We're not going to do anything about deporting the illegals. We're going to codify catch and release, and we're going to send $60 billion to Ukraine. And the Border Patrol should be thrilled about that, right? And they said that's the support they needed, right? Yeah, that should be great. Disaster is probably not even a tough enough word for what this was. Disaster is probably not even the right thing to say in a situation like this. It was whatever's worse than disaster. That's what this was. And so it was horrible from the get-go for Kamala Harris. Now, there is so much more to this interview. I do want to pause before we get to the rest of the interview. I do want to get to some of the reaction, because I think the reaction is also key to what's going on here. And I wanted to hold on. I I'm going to put that right there. Here's the reaction that we got from some of the people on, in the political realm. For example, this is, let's start with Donald Trump Jr., shall we? Talking to Jesse Waters on Fox News. Here's what he had to say about Kamala Harris's interview.
This was her first real aggressive questioning. How do you think she fared?
I think that was a major failure. And the reality is, Jesse, you don't go on Bret Baier if you're winning. This is an act of desperation from a desperate person. She's not going to do anything differently. She cut and pasted Joe Biden's policies and didn't even change the source code when a month after her coup, because, she likes to talk about democracy, but didn't win a single vote in her primary to become the Democratic nominee. It's absolutely amazing. The people that she talks about intelligence that say Trump is unstable, those are the same people that signed off on the Hunter Biden laptop being Russian disinformation. We know that's all a lie. It's an abject disaster for her.
Yeah, and that's a great abject disaster. That's a great. All right, so we're going to use abject disaster because that's exactly what it was, and we know that because we've seen the. Let's check the poly market average again. Let's see if it's gone down again for us, shall we? Let me go back here. Let me reload, and we're at 62.1. She actually got a little bit better. It went from 62.2 for Donald Trump to 62.1. So somewhere she gained a little. She gained a little bit of ground. But he wasn't the only one. It was also, what's his name? Murtaugh from the Trump campaign.
You would think when we've reached the point where we're 19 days left before the election that she would have an answer about what her plans for the country are. But that's the point of her whole campaign. It was not, they were hoping to ride this joy vibe all the way through to Election Day. You know that. She didn't want to come into Fox News and talk to you guys. She's desperate to try to shake things up. The way this shapes up has always been good for Donald Trump. People who are going to vote in this election have lived through both administrations. They know the economy was great under Donald Trump. The border was secure and the world was largely at peace. Under Harris and Biden, the economy is in shambles. Inflation is through the roof. The border is non-existent and the world is basically on fire. She's supposed to have answers for that. She's like the backup quarterback who throws an interception every time she gets in the game, and then she tells the head coach, hey, I want to be the starter now. That's not how it works. You have to have a plan. You have to have some kind of performance. Dana.
Yeah, and that's a great analogy. So Kamala Harris is out there and she's trying to vie for this position of president of the United States. And the only person, and she's running against not only Donald Trump, but she's running against herself. And that's probably why it's so difficult. That's probably why, I mean, you can't, when you're running against two people and one of them is yourself, it's a really bad spot to put yourself in. And he's 100% right. The only reason she went on this Fox interview in the first place is because she had to. Her campaign was doing so badly. She had no momentum. She had no ideas. Nobody believed her. She was She was having Barack Obama berate young black men. She was stealing Donald Trump's campaign policy positions. She had no plan for the future, and she was dodging the media. So she had no choice but to go on a media blitz. And somebody in her campaign staff said, hey, you got to go on Fox News. And the joy vibe was killed. Immediately, we saw that this is not an election about joy. This is an election where we need a serious person who can come in and tackle serious problems like immigration, serious problems like the economy, serious problems like, foreign policy and the threat of invasions and economic warfare, all these things that, quite frankly, everybody trusts Donald Trump about. And Bret Baier asked her about that. And and she said, she said this.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What are you talking about, lady? Hey, listen, I want to talk to you about something real quick before we get to the rest of this interview, which, by the way, is we haven't even gotten to the good parts yet. We haven't gotten to the now that Bret Baier has set her up for the fall. This is where he just, boom, pounds her until she falls down. But before we get to that, I wanted to. So I was watching this video earlier today about testosterone, and I know what you're thinking, Mark Kaye, you're such a manly man. Why would you need to watch a video about testosterone? And it's a fantastic point, but I want to show you this because I was watching this video about testosterone, and I learned a couple of things. For example, I'm going to bring it up here a little bit bigger. I learned a couple of things about testosterone while watching this video. First of all, I learned that there are certain foods that kill your testosterone and certain foods that actually boost your testosterone. Most guys think it's being drained by age or bad genetics or lack of exercise, but it's not that case. It has nothing to do with the gym. It has everything to do with the kitchen. And there is one food that has been found scientifically to devastate testosterone levels. And most men have no idea what that is. It's not junk food. It's not sugar. And in a way, it's something that they tell you. This is the worst part. It's something they tell you is good for you, but it turns out if you're a man and you want high testosterone levels, it's the total opposite. I was shocked. I told my wife about it. She goes, really? There's a company called V-Shred. And they're the team behind cutting-edge fitness and nutrition strategies. You may have seen them in all these, the Shape magazine, Muscle and Fitness. I don't read those magazines, but I know that they're in there. And if you remove this one testosterone-killing food from your diet, it could potentially unlock your body's true potential. Now, this is the video that I watched. I'm showing it to you there on the screen. If you want to see it for yourself, it's fascinating. I was watching this guy, Vince. His name is Vince Sant. I was sitting here watching and going, wow, this is real. I'm learning so much about my testosterone levels. And again, I know what you're saying, Mark, you're so manly. You have so much energy and vitality. It's true, but you can always learn more. So go watch this video. It's at sculptnation.com/MK, sculptnation.com/MK. And per usual, I put it in the description of this video, so it's easy for you to find later on. sculptnation.com/MK. If you want more testosterone, you got to, it's amazing. I'm really excited about my testosterone explosion. I'm really excited about what I learned. It's sculptnation.com/MK. Okay, let's get back to the border, shall we? Because look, there are some real questions and there are some real issues and there are some real problems we have with this country. And Kamala Harris is not really the answer to any of those problems. Kamala Harris is the problem. And one of the things that Bret Baier was really good about is pointing out that, look, despite what you say and despite what you may be telling people, most of Americans in this country don't really want you to be the next president of the United States. And it's not just racist white people from the suburbs. It's also black voters and it's Latino voters. I'm sorry if I know that scared probably a bunch of people. But that's, so here, what is your plan to do about that? Why do you think that is? And she just, of course, had no answers. Here he is asking about the trust that people show in her opponent, who she says is a threat to democracy.
Why do you think more people say they trust him on the economy than they trust you?
I think that when you look at an analysis of our plans for what we would do as President of the United States, it has been clear to those who study and understand how economic policy works that moving forward, because I do believe the American people are ready to turn the page on the divisiveness and the type of rhetoric that has come out of Donald Trump. People are ready to chart a new way forward, and they want a president who has a plan for the future and a plan that is sound and will strengthen our country. My plan for the economy does exactly that.
And now, we don't know what her plan for the economy is because she doesn't really have one. And whatever plan she has is just Joe Biden's plan that she cut and pasted and put on her website. So it's really weird for her to sit here and say, my plan for the economy, blah, 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 blah. But Bret Baier points out to her that, look, people, you keep talking about turning the page, but you're the one that's been here for, 3.5 years?
Frankly, exhausted of Bret.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person.
Wait, I'm sorry. Wait, what? Wait, what did she say? Donald Trump has been running for office?
Donald Trump has been running for office.
Hold on, hold on. I gotta get that clip because that just, let's play that one. Let's play that one again because I'm not sure what she's trying to say there.
Frankly, exhausted of Bret.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What are you talking about, lady? Her answer. This is, by the way, when whoever was in the room, and we know exactly what happened next, just where they were like, end it. Pull the plug, end it. This is over. This is abort. Abort is what they were yelling. This is the worst answer anyone's ever given, I think. He says to her, the country's on the wrong track. A whole bunch of Americans, 70+% of Americans say the country's on the wrong track. And you know who the engineer is right now? You and Joe Biden. 3.5 years of you and Joe Biden, and over 70% of Americans, Democrats and Republicans, say the country's on the wrong track. You've been running the joint for 3.5 years. And she looks at him squarely in the eye and says, and Donald Trump's been running for office. Right, because your policies are horrible. Donald Trump's been running for office. What is it?
Donald Trump has been running for office.
I mean, what is it? Yes, he has. Thank God. Thank God somebody's running for office other than you and Joe Biden. What kind of an answer is that? That's when Bret Baier, frankly, ma'am, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What are you talking about, lady? What are you talking about, woman? Please just answer the question. She lost it several times during this interview. She just started yelling incoherently. Whenever there was some issue that she didn't have an answer for, she would just start going back and she would just start yelling and screaming about Donald Trump. Here was one of her big meltdowns.
But talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it.
I don't know what he's talking about, unless he's talking about the criminals and the corrupt politicians who've been breaking the law. Yeah, I mean, I think we want criminals locked up and not, roaming the streets, killing people like the Democrats prefer to have them. It was always back to Donald Trump. He asked her this question about Iran because she said the biggest threat to the United States of America was Iran. And guess what she did? She brought Donald Trump back into I don't even know I couldn't even follow it.
A number of experts thought you would say China. The FBI director had said that. But you said Iran. If that's the case, what do you say to critics who look at the actions of your administration and say you're not acting like Iran is the number one threat?
Well, I will tell you most recently, whether it was in April or in October, and then several hours on each occasion, that Iran posed a threat to Israel. I was there, most recently in the Situation Room, in the most recent attack, working with the heads of our military and doing what America must always do to defend and to support Israel in its requirement to defend itself, and to give American support to be able to allow Israel to have the resources to defend itself against attack, including from Iran and Iran's terrorist proxies in the region.
Right.
And that
but those
is,
proxies were getting funded by
my
Iran.
commitment to that is unyielding and unwavering.
Critics just say that you either relaxed or failed to enforce sanctions on Iran, allowing all of this money to flow into Iran, like billions.
Let's go back to Donald Trump,
There it is.
who pulled out of a deal that would have actually put Iran in check.
The estimates
and then
in billions
it was during Donald Trump's
that
administration
go towards
that
the Iran regime.
I mean, he's he's trying to be so polite. He doesn't want to tell her to please shut up and answer the question. He's holding back with I can never do this, this is why I'm not a journalist. I'm not a journalist. I'm never, again, ever. One person once called me a journalist. I was like, what? No, do you even know what a journalist looks like? It's not me. So I'm sitting here and I'm talking to these, and I'm watching this and I'm like, what is she even saying here? She's saying that Donald Trump is the reason that Iran has all of this money. Donald Trump bankrupted Iran. Donald Trump's not the one who dumped cash on Iran's runways. That was Barack Obama and Joe Biden. And then she was the one that cut off oil production, started purchasing from Iran again, and made them billions of dollars. Oh, I guess we're done with that clip. And that is that. But that was her go-to. Let's get back to Donald Trump. somewhere around there, Bret Baier got the hard rap signal.
Madam Vice President,
And
they're giving me a hard rap
Well,
here.
I thank you for the time.
I thank you for the time.
It's good to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, now that was the end of the interview, but it wasn't the end of Bret Baier because, you know, he had more to say and people wanted the behind the scenes story. So he went on Sean Hannity's show and he went on with Martha McCallum and he told everybody exactly what happened. He told everybody about how they started the interview late.
You know, when the kicker in football, they call a timeout right before he's going to kick the field goal. They're icing the kicker. So we were supposed to start at 5 p.m. This was the time they gave us. Originally, we were going to do 25 or 30 minutes. They came in and said, well, maybe 20. So it was already getting whittled down. And then the vice president showed up about 5:15. We were pushing the envelope to be able to turn it around for the top of the 6 o'clock. So that's how it started. And I could tell when we started talking that she was going to be tough to redirect without me trying to interrupt. I did this with President Obama. At one point, I just said, Mr. President, I know you like the filibuster. I just didn't even have the chance to sometimes redirect in those ways. I had a lot of other questions.
Yeah, redirect is a nice way to put it. So they showed up late and they left early. They were trying to ice the kicker. They were trying to ice Bret Baier. So he jumped. So he's like, let me just jump right in with all this immigration stuff. That's why he tried to cut her off. That's why she tried to filibuster. That's why she tried to bring in all this unnecessary information that didn't make any sense in the grand scheme of things or in the concept of things. And then at the very end of it, they just started going ballistic.
Dana, you've been on the other side. You've been on the rapper as a press secretary interviewing a president. And, you know, I'm talking like 4 people waving their hands like it's got to stop. So, Martha, I had to dismount there at the end. There's so many things, and she maybe should do more of these.
Oh, he's saying the burn. Maybe you should do more of these, and then you would, be better at them. Is exactly what. That's Bret Baier. That's his way of, on the DL, just, leaving her with a. Yeah, you should do more interviews, Mrs. Vice President, Madam Vice President, because you're not very good at them. You could probably practice this a little bit more and then maybe you'd get a little bit better. The good news is, thanks to what Bret Baier did last night in his interview with Kamala Harris, I don't think we're going to be seeing any more of her. I know for a fact she's not going anywhere near the Joe Rogan podcast. If she can't handle 20 minutes uninterrupted with Bret Baier, she's not going to be able to handle 2 to 3 hours with Joe Rogan or any other podcaster. She's done. I know if you see her on another network that isn't going to cut and paste and slice and edit her words together, I would be totally shocked. Also, somebody at her campaign should get fired, but they won't. Here's the thing. I heard that Ian Sams was the reason that this interview happened. I don't know that for a fact. I don't know for sure at all. I don't know who decided this was the best thing for you to do. This is the greatest thing you could have done. I don't know whose choice that was, but that person should be fired. The problem is that person can't be fired because they're out there touting this as a huge win for Kamala Harris. They're out there saying Kamala Harris did a great job. She went right into the lion's den and she handed it to them. She held her own. She shows that she can go into uncomfortable situations and places where she is, outmatched. If she can handle Bret Baier and Fox News, she can handle Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un and Governor Xi or President Xi and all these other people. That's how they're trying to spin this. I don't know that she handled anybody. I feel like she was more handled or mauled by a very cuddly Bret Baier. The bigger problem for Kamala Harris is that tonight is the Al Smith dinner, and she is skipping it. And it would have been the Al Smith dinner. This would have been a great way for her to kind of save a little bit of face. There was, I don't know if I have it here. There was a clip that Donald Trump posted. Here it is. This is from Donald Trump's last Al Smith dinner. There wasn't one during COVID. And this is the last Al Smith dinner where he was with Hillary Clinton, and it was the day after one of their debates. And the Al Smith dinner, for those of you that don't know, is held by the Cardinal of the Catholic Church in New York City. It's a big to-do. This is it. This is like every candidate for president has shown up against or alongside the person they're running against, except for Walter Mondale. He didn't show up, and we're not really sure why, but he got destroyed. I mean, the floor was wiped, and a lot of people are drawing a comparison that Ronald Reagan killed Walter Mondale, swept every state except for Minnesota, And as a result, you know, maybe he should have gone to the Al Smith dinner. Maybe that was God's way of saying, you know, we will not be mocked. If you get invited to the Al Smith dinner, you show up like a good little boy and you make fun of yourself and Ronald Reagan and everyone else. Kamala Harris is skipping it tonight, and I think it's a bad idea. But this was what Donald Trump posted from his Al Smith dinner with Hillary Clinton.
With all of the heated back and forth between my opponent and me at the debate last night, we have proven that we can actually be civil to each other. In fact, just before taking the dais, Hillary accidentally bumped into me, and she very civilly said, "Pardon me."
Now, this would have been a fantastic example of how Kamala Harris could bounce back. It would have been a great opportunity for her to come off of what was the worst interview, not just of her political career, but I think of anyone's political career. She could have bounced back from what was the worst interview, and she could have gone into a situation where Donald Trump is there, and they could have poked fun at each other. They could have had some levity. They could have had a situation that would have deflected. But instead, because some genius in her think tank, some just brainiac at the Kamala Harris campaign said, you know what we should do? We should skip the Al Smith dinner because we don't want to look like we're aligning with Catholics who are pro. And this is the whole reason. They are so into abortion. They love abortion so much. They made abortion such a key point of their campaign that they can't even walk into a Catholic dinner. A tradition that presidential candidates for decades have taken part in. They can't even walk into a Catholic room and say, you know what, we're pro-abortion, you're anti-abortion, we get it, let's have some food and fun. They can't even do it. They wanted to, and it's not necessarily their fault. It's because the people whose votes they're relying on are so wackadoodle. They're so out in left field. It's like the pro-Palestinian movement. The anti-abortion, I'm sorry, the pro-life, the pro-choice segment of the Democrat Party has become so far left, they become so radicalized, they become so angry that even going into a dinner with the Catholic Church would cost them dearly. So they avoid it like the plague. Now they're giving up, they're abandoning this situation, which would have been fantastic. Fantastic for Kamala Harris to diffuse the horribleness of the Fox News interview. And while they're not taking that opportunity, they're also ticking off a whole lot of Catholics.
So the Catholic vote is very important. Kamala Harris really doesn't seem to be considering it. She has a very sort of mixed record in the Senate as Attorney General on religious things. And in Pennsylvania, Catholics are, according to last exit polls 2020, 30% of the population. So in a state that's 1%, right, that's an important constituency.
It ain't 1% anymore. I don't buy the whole Pennsylvania's 1%, but yeah, she's thumbing her nose at Catholics. She went on Fox News, she tanked, and she said, you know what? And she's always the one talking about bringing people together. I would love to bring people. We're going to bring the country together. I'm going to be a president for all people, except Catholics, who make up 30% of the voting bloc in Pennsylvania, the one state that I need to win if I'm going to win this election. And oh yeah, I dissed their governor because he's Jewish. She said in one state, she's ticked off 30% of the population because she's avoiding Catholics. And now she's also said, you know what? I'm also not going to pick your governor because I got to placate these pro-Palestinian people who aren't going to deliver you the White House. They're not going to do it. And Donald Trump is going to walk in there tonight and he is going to make jokes and he's going to shake hands and he's going to have fun. And all the clips tomorrow are going to be about Donald Trump looking like a regular Joe, having a laugh with yesterday, Donald Trump, and this is the other, Donald Trump has it's really interesting. Kamala Harris is doing more of the kinds of interviews that Donald Trump used to do back when Donald Trump was new at doing interviews. And Donald Trump's doing really great, smart, well-placed interviews. The Economics Club, the Bloomberg interview at the Economics Club of Chicago was a fantastic interview because it showcased Donald Trump's knowledge and ability and skill at running a business and a corporation, his understanding of international economics and how this decision affects that decision and how inflation works and jobs and tariffs and everything else. And he held his own, and he got a round of applause and a standing ovation from economists in Chicago. There are, if you could pick two more liberal groups of people and put them in the room together, it would be economists and people from Chicago. And Donald Trump gets a standing ovation from them because he knows what he's talking about. He goes yesterday, Harris Faulkner on Fox News, and it was an interesting day because Harris Faulkner and Donald Trump were both on, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris were both on Kamala Harris Faulkner. If we still did before and after, that'd be a great one, by the way. So Donald Trump and Kamala Harris were both on Fox News last night, or yesterday during the day, in very different situations. Donald Trump went into a women's forum. It was a town hall led by Harris Faulkner with a bunch of women. And he answered women's questions. And he said, all right, what are your questions, women? And they're like, I feel unsafe about my kid at school. I feel unsafe because there's men in the ladies' room. I feel unsafe because my girls are getting pummeled in sports and all these things. And Donald Trump's like, we're going to stop that. We're going to stop this. We're going to stop that. Your daughters are going to be safe. Any other questions? And they're like, no. And they gave him a standing ovation. Last night, Donald Trump, while Kamala Harris was getting ripped to shreds by Bret Baier, went to Univision or Telemundo. I always forget. I know that it's one or the other, or maybe they're just the same thing. And he did a town hall with Latino voters, and he answered all their questions. And then they released this fantastic ad.
Ay, 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 por Dios. Yo voy a votar por Donald Trump.
Ay, 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 ay.
La buena vida,
Oh,
la economía, hazlo por tu familia, latinos por Donald Trump.
It goes on and on. I love that. La buena vida, la economía, Latinos por Trump. And it's, so he's doing these well-placed, very specific interviews and town halls, and he's handling himself way better than Kamala Harris. And not at one single town hall, not at one single interview. And I've seen a lot of them. Donald Trump's been everywhere. He's on podcasts, he's on town halls, he's on Fox News, he's on Newsmax, he's doing rallies. Not once have I ever heard anybody say to Donald Trump, I'm sorry, I actually have no idea. What are you talking about?
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
No one's ever said to Donald Trump, what are you talking about? They may have thought it, but they've never, ever said it. It's going to be, I thought it was going to be a long 20 days, but it's going to be shorter. It's going to be shorter than I thought. Listen, I got some interesting news last night. I was invited to go speak at the Republican Men's Club of Clay County, which was fantastic. Our good buddy Aaron Bean, that's his district. And I went in there, and I'll tell you what, here's the interesting thing about the election, because I've had 2 speaking engagements this week. On Monday, I went and spoke to a group of Catholic voters. And yesterday, I went to go speak to the Clay County Republicans Club for Men. And there were women there. It wasn't like a weird dude thing. But it's so funny because the last time I had this many speaking engagements was in 2016, right before the election. I came back from the RNC and everyone was like, Mark, come tell us all the stuff you learned at the RNC. Mark, come tell us what you think about the election. Mark, come tell us this, that, and the other. And so I think I've got like 20 days left of speaking engagements. And then no one's going to want to talk to me until like 2020 or 2028. That'll be the next 2024. Every 4 years when there's an election, I'll go out and I'll talk to people. But I got an email yesterday, and it was very exciting because I got invited back to Mar-a-Lago next week for an event that I will tell you about here probably, if not tomorrow, by Monday. I just need to make sure. I just need to get all the final plans in place. But it's a big event with a lot of conservative superstars, and I'm really excited about it. And I'm excited to bring you that opportunity. And we'll be doing. That's the thing. We'll all go down there early. We'll do the show live from Mar-a-Lago, and it's just gonna be so much fun and so much excitement. And I think with the tide turning the way it is, I think it's it's always a fun time at Mar-a-Lago, but it's going to be even more funnerer this time around. Hey, speaking of Donald Trump and Mar-a-Lago, go Trump yourself. The brand new, updated, rewritten, re-edited, re-recorded version, ebook and audiobook bundle is now available at markkay.com/Trump. markkay.com/Trump. This is the book that I wrote earlier this year, and it has been rewritten now because it was 10 ways to live like Trump in a Joe Biden economy, but now it's 10 ways to live like Trump in any economy. Because let's face it, Donald Trump, he's been successful in any economy. And what I've done, this is a, if you're a capitalist, if you're a conservative, if you're somebody who loves self-help and motivation and you want to make your life better, this is a book where I outlined everything Donald Trump has done throughout his career in politics and entertainment and real estate, everything he's done with his family, because look, the true sign of greatness in a man or a woman is you look at their kids. You look at their kids and you go, man, they got some great kids. How did they do that? And that's when you know these people really have it together. So I looked at Donald Trump and I said, these are the things that make Donald Trump a great leader, a great parent, a great entertainer, a great communicator. These are the reasons why he's been able to get everything he's gotten. And it's 10 of them. And it's a short little book, and you can get it delivered instantly right now in the Go Trump Yourself ebook audiobook bundle. It is, that always happens. I got to lock this. That's why. It is, in my humble opinion, it is one of the best books that I've ever written. And there are all kinds of fantastic reviews if you want to read them. There's some here. There's some more here. If you don't believe me, you can believe all these people, because why would all these people lie? It goes into a little bit about what the book is. And then, of course, like I said earlier, if you just click the blue button here, there's tons of them all over. We will sit within minutes. If you have to go to the bathroom, you'll have the book ready to go, and you can be listening to me while you're in the bathroom. You can be reading the book while you're in the bathroom. You can be doing both. Go to markkay.com/Trump. markkay.com/Trump for instant delivery of the newly updated Go Trump Yourself, 10 Ways to Live Like Trump in Any Economy. All right, I have to get out of here. Thank you so much to everybody watching. We broke a record, I think, on Rumble today. That's fantastic. So many Rumblers. Tell your friends, hit subscribe. Make sure you're coming back over and over again. On YouTube, we'll be posting videos later today and tomorrow morning and over the weekend. We're going to be going nonstop. We have so much work to do. We've got so much we've got to get done. We can't stop now. We've got fewer than 20 days. And yes, Kamala Harris is digging her own grave, but it's going to take all of us. So subscribe to this channel, download this podcast, make sure you're subscribed and you've hit notifications. When you get the notification, because, hitting notifications, that's step one. When you get the notification, come and watch and listen to whatever new content we've created, because, that's the whole point of getting notified. And no matter where we go, no matter what happens in the next couple of weeks, whether we're traveling down to Mar-a-Lago, whether we're here at the at K-Treat HQ, whether we're going somewhere else, there's still plenty of time left in October. There's going to be more October surprises, and we are going to do everything we need to do, whether it's early voting, day of voting, driving somebody to the polls, ballot harvesting, anything and everything we can do, we are going to do. Because we all are in this together. We all have the same goal. We all need to beat Kamala Harris. We all need to reinstate Donald Trump, because that's how we will all save the republic. All right. See you guys tomorrow.